Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the One Divine Challenge. I'm your host, Extra Mayo, and today's build is the Lightning Conduit Elementalist. So without further ado, let's get started. Let's talk about Lightning Conduit. Lightning Conduit is a relatively new skill that was released last patch in 3.19, and it saw widespread use, even after receiving pre-release nerfs. After last patch, the developers considered the skill to be too strong, so in this patch it received another damage nerf by about 25%, which took it off a lot of people's radar as an overpowered skill. But that's good news for us, since that means most of the gear for this build is much cheaper than it used to be. For example, the main unique item for this build, the Thunderfist gloves, at one point cost multiple divines last league, but this league it's been under 20 chaos since day 3. Since I had a substantial amount of leftover currency, I decided to splurge a little bit on my chest piece and go with Impulse's Broken Heart. Any chest piece can work in this slot, and we don't even need a 6-link, so feel free to choose any body armor that you want. Since there were no affordable 5-link Impulses on the market, I purchased the materials to get a 5-link deterministically through the crafting bench. The total cost of the armor and the crafting materials was 59 chaos. Now before we continue, I just want to make a quick disclaimer. The specific item setup that I've chosen in this video, and in other One Divine Challenge videos, are not meant to be misconstrued as league starters, as the prices for these items are more expensive at the beginning of a league due to lower supply. My One Divine Challenges are done after the first month of the league, where most prices have typically stabilized. These showcases are a personal challenge for me, but also may help those who are joining the league late and want some ideas for a decent build on a budget. Now, back to regularly scheduled programming. After filling out my basic skill tree, I had about 10 extra skill points laying around. Since I had the points, and I didn't yet have a source of lightning exposure, I chose to incorporate as part of the build a cluster jewel in order to grant us that access to lightning exposure. I went out to the market and bought a cheap minion cluster jewel with heraldry on it, since that's the only thing I cared about, and another random lightning damage large cluster as a way to spend my extra skill points. Getting exposure in this way synergizes with our Ascendancy, and grants a huge negative 35% lightning resistance to exposed targets. Once all of your gear is acquired, make sure to use any leftover currency to do what's necessary for your build to be online and functional. This includes purchasing any needed gems, and getting your flasks set up to your liking. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the Ascendancy and the skill tree. The first Ascendancy points will be put into Shaper of Storms to ensure a 100% chance to shock. Next, we choose Mastermind of Discord, which grants us that huge chunk of exposure paired with our cluster jewels. Third is Heart of Destruction for more AoE while mapping and single target damage for bossing. And finally, I chose Shaper of Winter as the final node for extra utility and damage. Looking at our skill tree, our main focus is on increasing our lightning damage, cast speed, and shock effectiveness, since shock effectiveness is a more damage multiplier for Lightning Conduit. We'll also take life nodes, needed attributes, and mana reservation efficiency. I decided to incorporate some cheap cluster jewels into this build, but again, that's completely optional. Let us take a moment to talk about the mechanics of Lightning Conduit. There are two major factors to always keep in mind. Number 1, the skill can only be applied to shocked enemies. And number 2, once they are struck by Lightning Conduit, shocks are removed from those enemies. Notice that the Lightning Conduit skill itself cannot inflict shock, so we'll need a secondary skill to apply continuous shocks to enemies, and then cast Lightning Conduit intermittently to rain down huge damage from the sky. The secondary skill I've chosen to pair with Lightning Conduit is Orb of Storms, which will continuously apply shocks in an area, and even do some decent damage on its own. We'll be casting Orb of Storms and then following up with Lightning Conduit strikes immediately afterward. Our movement skill, Lightning Warp, also does lightning damage and applies shocks, so it's a viable option to teleport into a pack of enemies and then cast Lightning Conduit. Feel free to mix it up between Orb of Storms and Lightning Warp until you find a combination that suits your personal playstyle. So there you have it, the Lightning Conduit Elementalist. The POB for this character will be listed in the description below. Enjoy the upcoming gameplay demonstration, and I'll see you all in the next video.
that stretches the sanity